welcome to CCRS Regional Briefing Podcast. So for today, we have our latest episode on geopolitical landscape in Southeast Asia at the Crossroad, with the examination on the roles of extra-regional actors in the region. As we all know that Southeast Asia these days, we on complex dynamics, we on the crossroad. That's the most consensus way that everyone has agreed. The region is no longer navigating our own internal dynamics, but also it has been increasingly shaped by the roles of extra-regional actors. The United States, China, Japan, and others are more present and more competitive, more consequential than at any point since the end of the Cold War era. At the same time, ASEAN role as the central manager of a regional order is under pressure. The regional grouping credibility has been eroded. This phenomena is not happening in Southeast Asia alone, but it's stem from the overall decline of the spirit of multilateralism and the principle of international laws. So this episode, I think we will discuss on a big fundamental question on how has the extra-regional actors shaped the region, especially in the current context. By the current context here, we discuss more on the decades of 2020s. Today's discussion will divide it into three main segments. The first one, we discuss on the overall Southeast Asia geopolitical dynamics with the involvement of extra-regional actors. The second one, we will zoom into the Cambodia-Thailand conflict, and we will discuss on the role of the third parties. And lastly, we will discuss on the strategic choice that Southeast Asian states have at the moment to charter the course forward in this complex landscape. So I'm joined by three speakers who bring different perspectives on this issue. And on my left side, we have Dr. Sovinda, professor on strategy, and nearby him we have Mr. Aung Chhengpor, from program manager from Juncture Forum, and lastly Mr. Niseiy, editor-in-chief of the Cambodianess. So let me begin with Dr. Sovinda. Could you share me your view on how has Southeast Asia geopolitical landscape has evolved in the first half of 2020s?
Very wonderful. First of all, thank you, Rotha, and thank you, CCRS, for inviting me to be on your podcast. I'm a big fan of your work for a long time. So big congratulations for hosting this podcast, and I'm very happy to be joined by my two good friends as well, Chhengpor and Niseiy. I am a big fan of their work for a long time as well. So it's really an honor and pleasure for me to be among them. I think the geopolitical landscape in Southeast Asia has evolved quite dramatically in the past 5 years or so, particularly what's happening in Cambodia and what's happening in Thailand, and of course what's happening in Southeast Asia. What we are seeing now, what we are witnessing now, is the competitive environment where bigger countries seem to forego diplomacy and choose military might as the way forward. So what we can expect now and into the future is the strong competition that one way or the other disregard the role of diplomacy and the role of international law. I'd like to keep this short, and we'll look forward to the next discussion.
What about you, Chhengpor? You have anything to add to Dr. Sovinda?
Exactly, I agree with Bong Sovinda observation, and I would like to view the landscape of geopolitics from the lens of how Cambodia sees it so far. I think there are major shifts in the last 2 decades, at least on the case of Cambodia. In the year of 1990s, the year of 2000s, Cambodia is still in the heyday of post-Cold War order. We believe in multilateralism. That's why Cambodia got into ASEAN. That's why Cambodia got into WTO. But the first round of border conflict with Thailand in 2008, and then accompanied by the global financial crisis in that same year, that you have seen multilateral body and unable to fully function to the satisfaction of Cambodians. For example, in the case of Gravity in 2008. So that in that year, they come to a realization there is some crack and some limitation in international order, post-war international order. We see the big shift toward China in that year, and ever since, up until quite recently, that shift have peaked, and then we have seen some way of readjustment of foreign policy. So to see it through the lens of Cambodia as a small state, as a product of the post-Cold War international order, with UNCTAD, with United Nations intervention, with the role of the United States, and then 2008, China appeared to be one of the few countries at the time to emerge unscathed from the global financial crisis, despite what many scholars have said about bandwagonings, about realignment to China took place, and it makes logical sense for a small state like Cambodia when the realization, early warning system that the international international system cannot fully functions, so that such alignment is much needed. So that from the land of Cambodia, but quite recently there's some adjustment given the calculation based on the domestic political priority, but also on where what you call extra-regional player have view and have intervened in the region, also influence might recent change to a return to rapprochement with the US, but also with to deal with the new global order led by a more powerful China, but also a more assertive United States in the region. That's all I have for the first round.
I see. So just to follow up from your input, you discuss a lot from the historical evolution of from the lens of Cambodia. So what about in the 2020s? Is there any significant dynamics that you think it would shape the perception of Cambodia as an example of small states toward the concept of multilateralism, and shape the perception of such small states toward the roles of extra-regional actors in the region?
There's certainly there's some major event that could be an explanation for that. For example, the increasing hostile environment around the world in terms of global security, another confirmation that the international system cannot really fully function as a result of the conflict with Thailand 2025. They come to realization for Cambodia, but also it should be a reflection of many other small states and small powers, that the international law, international system alone is not enough to guarantee your security, to guarantee your survivability. also to guarantee your prosperity. So there needs some sort of additional catalyst. For example, quite recently, I think our speaker will talk about it soon, the participation in President Trump Board of Peace. It could be questionable because from the view in Washington, it could be the direct challenge to the United Nations to provide alternative. But so in the positive sense, it could be a challenge in the way that challenge the United Nations to rethink its current structure and practice
definitely.
as well, so that reform can take place. So this kind of context matter for small state like Cambodia, and to be proactive in terms of thinking, but also to be very much calculating on which regional mechanisms. There are major questions for Cambodia whether or not joining BOP is being considered by some decision maker in Beijing as Cambodia picking side. So we will have a lot of explanation, a lot of assurance to say to other partners, especially the Indo-Pacific middle power fellow like China, like Australia, like Japan, like India. So we need a lot of that explanation. We need a lot of conversation with our friend in the region.
I need to cut you here. So for Niseiy, you have anything to add on how has Southeast Asia geopolitical landscape has evolved in this first half of 2020s?
Well, I agree with both speakers that the change in the geopolitical landscape with increasing risky situations where a small state is increasingly vulnerable to different issues, including the mice make rice mindset you have seen. But it doesn't mean that we have to give up on multilateralism. Like self-sufficient is important. It's a reflection for us because, like Chhengpor already mentioned, there's other elements. So Cambodia domestic reform is much needed in the current situation to build that self-sufficiency capability in response to a more dangerous world. But at the same time, you need to do more in supporting or maybe the advocate for whatever like you call for peace and so on. But at the same time, how we can push for a reform, like you mentioned, United Nations, ASEAN as well. I mean, it has. I think we should say ASEAN must have done more in terms of facilitating everyone know that, everyone talk about it, but in what way we should push forward the change within ASEAN itself. For example, we used to have very charismatic leader who want to jump in and support and really appreciate Malaysian chairmanship, but now it rests upon the Philippines, the current chair. So every eye is on the Philippines. But how much we going to continue this and then encourage the chairs to do more? So I think you have every element there that could prevent pretty much interference from the outsider if you don't like it. But make sure that you do your work as well. So I'm not sure that the question is still pretty much complex and. How much Cambodia itself is a member would encourage, and then it's a question for all ASEAN member states. And it's not just ASEAN, but multilateralism. We talk about shared norm and regional and order. The UN, pretty much the UN. So we talk about crisis diplomacy. So it's increasingly vital for now. But how much we think about it? So what are we going to do? Like a major power, the US, for example, it might have its own way of dealing with the current situation, but China, Japan, and many other countries. But of course, major power tend to be using that kinds of situation to justify its own action. But it doesn't mean that you allow them to do without holding them accountable for that. And the crisis diplomacy, I want to mention, because it's increasingly dangerous. You need more this kind of intervention before the conflict continue to escalate, like into full scale, for example, like Cambodia itself. So the UN Secretary General has been mandated to do the work, but I'm sure that they have so much on their plate. So they could not do more to prevent the conflict. So it's just like, well, there's a lot of simple way. Like you might have a phone call, you might fly in and do more work with the Cambodian Thai counterparts. So I think it might not be hard, but the only thing is you start to act. So I think crisis diplomacy is pretty much important right now in the more dangerous world. But we need to push forward that. You need to think more about crisis diplomacy, start acting before it escalates.
I see. We will jump into that in next segment on the Cambodia-Thailand conflict. But before going that, I just coin a question to the three speakers on whether you see the current involvement of extra-regional actors in the region a productive way to uphold peace and stability in the region.
I think the question is really important. You can take a look at it both ways. On the one hand, the involvement of extra regional actors, as you call them, will contribute to maintaining peace and stability in the region. But on the other hand, it will weaken the region's capability to stand on its own. So in that particular case, you have to be careful a bit to what extent do you want to involve them, because one point from my two colleagues here regarding the role of ASEAN, if ASEAN doesn't play an important role in this particular case, then ASEAN will lose its relevance. Then you will always depend on the external actors, extra-regional actors to come and resolve your own issues. So in that sense, it's not look good on the region. But on the other hand, involving the regional actor is beneficial in the sense that it can help provide a certain reassurance, to quote my colleague's word, that if the two actors or three actors cannot resolve their own differences, you need sort of like arbiter just to come and say, hey, look, please stop. If you don't stop that, I'm gonna reprimand you or punish you in a certain ways. But the big question we all need to think about is how do we involve, right, the external actor, and to what extent, and under what circumstance, and under what condition. I think these questions are difficult to answer for the time being.
It's quite difficult to define the boundary, this and that. But what about Chhengpor and Niseiy? You have anything to jump in whether you support to have this kind of involvement from other actors to the region or not?
In case of emergency, I believe it's necessary. Taking the example of the intervention of the United States in the late July 2025, fighting between Cambodia and Thailand. I think the formula of the ceasefire is there. I think it came from Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim as a personality, as the chair of ASEAN. But the problem is there is some complex political economy structure in Thailand. I'm not saying on the side of Cambodia because I don't have enough data to say no to that ceasefire. So where the problem with that formula is personality like Prime Minister Anwar have good intention, have good formula to encourage the conflict party, the dispute party, to stop the fighting. What he lack is a leverage on both sides. That's where President Trump jumped in. Yeah. President Trump come up with the right leverage at the right time for the two countries to stop the fighting, which was the tariff. It was just a few days before the tariff negotiation deadline as part of the Liberation Day tariff overhaul of all U.S. trade system. So it just there. I think the ASEAN as a region need personality like Anwar. But also that's also another layer of problem because it become too dependent on the political will of certain ASEAN chair, of certain politicians who lead ASEAN at the time. Not ASEAN as an institution to have robust structural mechanism not only to manage conflict and crisis, but also to prevent conflict in the same levels. And the second layer is the leverage. ASEAN as an institution do not have the leverage to force member into stopping fighting. In the case of Thailand, Cambodia, it's been a very hard struggle. And what I said to the media at the time is there are only two major powers who have the right leverage to force. Even the United States, in the second phase of the fighting in December, could not fully convince the Thai to stop the fighting, though Cambodia have been repeatedly asking for ceasefire at the time. So in the matter of peace, for the sake of peace, I encourage, in case of emergency, I encourage intervention. But they should not be a staying factor. ASEAN should come up with its own mechanism to provide power. For example, I think I can debate quite even further whether or not we should empower the Secretariat of ASEAN even more.
Yeah, but we should deep dive on this issue in later on of our episode. But so for Niseiy, so Dr. Sovinda, he mentioned it's he somewhere in the middle. Chhengpor welcome the role of extra-regional actors in the case of emergency. What about you?
I think it depends on the issue rather than whether it is emergency or whether it's just like Bong mentioned. As long as you have the autonomy to shape or decide your own decisions, so you don't allow them to hijack or maybe you dictate your decision. So I think the conflict that we have experienced, I think before allowing it to be emergency issue, I mean we have certain ways of de-escalate the conflict. For example, the Cambodian Thailand dispute. But whether we consider it as, because it's a domestic, I would say internal ASEAN issue. So it's actually important if we stop it and de-escalate it before it turned to be an emergency issue, before someone could put their hand in. So I think back to ASEAN roles again, back to country confidence building measures and crisis management and so on. So it doesn't matter whether emergency or not, but you have you have enough power and all the effort that would be made to prevent such conflict to be escalating. So I believe that it depends on the issue. They are important in as the partner, as the development partner, cooperation partner, and everything. But it depends on what kind of issue we need them to support us. But it doesn't have to be emergency issue or somewhere in between. So you have the right to decide which issue you want them to engage. So I think that's important for us, because you give them you don't give them more leverage over the issue that you can deal with among yourself better.
I think Southeast Asia, especially in the time of conflict. I mean conflict here. Usually the interstate conflicts. In Southeast Asia, we are prone to have the involvement of other parties. Here's why: two reasons. The first reasons, I think it's because of the regional states itself, themselves, they invite the other powers to intervene. The second reason is because of the major states, the major powers. I think the extra-regional actors, they are interested to jump in by themselves. So in this case, it's not about jumping out the Cambodia-Thailand conflict. I think look at the case of the South China Sea. We have seen the pleas from some Southeast Asian claimant states to internationalize the issue for many years. But the involvement of other extra-regional actors in this conflict only occur, I can even argue, only occur after 2010, when Hillary Clinton, back then she was the Secretary of State of the United States, she termed South China Sea as the national interest of the U.S. national security, something like that. She mentioned about the freedom of navigation and freedom of overflight. So since then, we have seen the involvement of the U.S. and other partners, including some Western countries like Europe, Australia, and even Japan to some extent, just recently. And going back to the Cambodia-Thailand conflict, I think this much to my two reasons. First, it's because of the invitation of the regional states, in this case Cambodia. We have invited other partners to validate, to mediate the conflict, because not because we lost trust or confidence on the regional organization or something, but we from my perspective is to amplify the diplomatic weight in dealing with this crisis, because Cambodia, let's be frank, we have limited military capability in dealing with this issue. So the only shot that we have is to go with the diplomacy way. We go to ASEAN, we seek for, if you follow the our leadership activities in any courtesy calls or any engagement, they always mention about this conflict since day one. Since day one here is since before the war as well, and this kind of engagement with other partners, with other extra-regional actors to mediate the conflict is more intensified after the first round of the war in July. So there's the case of Cambodia that we have called for, the involvement of the international community. And for the second case, even if the regional states we have urged for any involvement from the international community, if any extra-regional actors they not interested in dealing with this, I think the involvement is not concrete or productive per se. Like for the case of the first round of ceasefire, for instance, the United States President Donald Trump, he, regardless of his motivation, he jumped in, he do a phone call diplomacy using, like Bon Chhengpor rightly mentioned, using available leverages like the tariff, for example. And with this kind of enthusiasm from the extra-regional actors, like President Trump, for example, this kind of involvement would go forward. Like we have the KL Peace Accord in October, for instance. So going forward from this, looking at the case of Cambodia-Thailand situation, from your point of view, from the three of your point of view, how should this conflict be contextualized? Whether it's just purely a bilateral issue, or has it evolved into a geopolitical issues with the after we have seen the string of involvement from great powers and middle powers, for instance. Anyone?
First? Go with Will first. Give a first shot.
To contextualize the Thai-Cambodian conflict, in the first phase of the fighting in July, there is an article on very well-known global media calling to portray the conflict as a proxy between American treaty ally and the China closest ally in the regions. So which was one of the most incorrect characterization of the conflict. For this conflict is more motivated by domestic factor, more motivated by historical grievance. So there are the calling it as proxy, geopolitical proxy war is more kind of disregard of the local domestic condition of the conflict on the ground, the Thailand factor, Cambodia factor, for example. But you try to compare the plight of Cambodia in this conflict as smaller state in the conflict to those of I would not compare to Vietnam in the South China Sea, given Vietnam is also have they openly oppose Chinese claim in the South China Sea, but also have some sort of political consideration given party-to-party relation between the two countries. Also, I take it in the case of the Philippines. So both Cambodia, you look at these two cases, Cambodia in the border conflict with Thailand, Philippines in South China Sea, this always attempt for a smaller state to regionalize, internationalize the issue because they understand that they cannot win by going force to force. They cannot duel.
Yep.
And they believe better outcome would be diplomacy, better outcome would be to make sure everybody get involved, that you will not be sitting in the same room of two people and the other side is stronger than you, can outpower you, can outmatch you. So you need everybody to come in and to see the basic signature different between the two. So in that case, both Philippines and Cambodia believe that international law are on their side. So they want everybody to understand that. That's why Cambodia trying to get everybody involved with at first getting leverage from United States and later China, and then having the ASEAN observer team as the mainstay to ensure the ceasefire is respected, to ensure that these people have an eye on the issue, similar to how the Philippines deal with it, trying to get everybody, get Japan, get Australia, United States in the issue.
Yep.
They did try going to permanent court of arbitration 2016, though non-binding, but get some sort of legal clarification of the claim itself. So these two have the issue of Thai Cambodian conflict have more of domestic and historical motivation than the geopolitical. I said little geopolitical parts of this conflict is more likely the effect of the conflict itself. So the US tried to get in whatever the motive of President Trump is, for example, trying to get his Nobel Peace Prize, but also it matters more to the Chinese. So I believe there are only two powers who have the real leverage to stop the fighting: the US and China.
Yep.
US have the power to do so, but can't decide on which leverage to decide, especially the leverage in the second phase of the fighting no longer work because you can there are different government in Thailand in July and in December. In July you have a very hopeless cabinet in power, waiting to be ousted. But also in December you have a very energetic cabinet in Thailand with an election on the horizon. So whatever you convene with tariff, it would not work with the will not compete with the need to win vote.
Yep.
So yeah, this different, and I think China have its more of its interest in the conflict because they believe it's their own region, their own now what we call the Monroe style sphere of influence. So I think China they have the stake in it, but they're very calculative in terms of when to step in.
Yeah. We go further on each the roles of each third parties in this conflict. But before going that, Sovinda and Niseiy, you have anything to add on to Chhengpor? He mentioned that this conflict is more bilateral, rooted in the local, domestic, and historical grievance rather than, and while the geopolitical issue per se is the result of this bilateral conflict. What's your take on that?
I think it has been an agreement that these kinds of conflicts between the two, been driven by the domestic politics and the historical grievance rather than the geopolitical or proxy war, whatever. So it doesn't serve any interest of those major power, considering the fact that there's many interests, especially China and US, in both countries. So including Japan as well, I think the one that really greatly concerns about the escalating impacts of this conflict because they have so much supply chain and production chain between the two countries, and it affects the entire regional economics interest as well. So I think there's nothing to be considered as the proxy or geopolitical conflicts for both countries, Thailand and Cambodia. So I totally agree with Chhengpor about this side.
Yeah, we all agree that it's not a proxy. It's not to define it as a proxy war. I think it's a misunderstanding the context. Even the definition per se, we haven't seen any great power rallying behind any belligerent. So to say it as a proxy, but my point here is whether this issue has evolved into some sort of a geopolitical agenda within regional grouping, or perhaps, I don't know, in the international stage, in the UN. So
I think let me interject a bit. I think the idea that smaller states, for example, you mentioned Philippines and of course Cambodia wants to regionalize, intentionalize the issue. I think this is a good way to do that. The important question that after we do that, to what extent do you want to do that, right? If you think about it in terms of spectrum, 0 to 10, you want to do it at a 10. If you want to do it at a 10, you have to think about the consequences of doing that. We have many examples throughout history in the past 200 years, I would say. You can take a look at what's happening in Ukraine now. Ukraine has been fighting Russia for many years now, and the issue is internationalized. Of course, Ukraine has a lot of support from the EU and from the United States, but even you have this kind of support, right? This massive support from Europe and from the US, still your country is destroyed. So then the important question, if we want to do that, we want to internationalize the issue, and to what extent, and are we ready when the issues are internationalized? So this is the important question now. I keep asking myself for quite some time now, because let's face it, the aggressor, the belligerent actor would not care so much about whether an issue is internationalized, right? Russia doesn't really care so much about that. The US has tried very hard to bring Russia to the negotiation table. Of course, they met, right? Of course, they talked at certain point in history. We hope that it's going to be something positive coming out of the negotiation, but turns out to be no. Then we can take a look at that experience, and coming back to the case of Cambodia, are we seeing any light, right, when we internationalize that? And then the question of the involvement of the external actor, right? The United States has done, let's say, all the credits to Trump, did bring certain period of peace to both countries, but it did not last. Now you had China coming in and providing its own assistance to bring about peace between the two countries. But the question again, will it last, right? Will it last? So then we only have two options here: if it lasts or it doesn't last, right? So then smaller state have to think about other ways alongside regionalization, internationalization strategy of the issue. I think these are the questions that are really hard to answer for now.
Yeah. Anything to add? No?
It's just like, I like the point Sovinda make, but I think there are also another choice for country involved. For example, like domestic audience, you have to respond to their need as well. So for now, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, but what you're going to deal with the need and demand of your domestic audience. So I think it's going to be a very challenging. It's not just outside geopolitical environment, but domestically, there are a lot of things.
I see.
Yeah. Let me build on that. I think this is really interesting. So the thing that, in fact, you talked about the domestic reform. I think administratively, that should be the priority, one priority. But if you think about it, the society as a whole, if you read history carefully enough, you will see that any small states, people within that small state, if they unified as one, no single big power can destroy them. So socially unified people will win most of the time. So in addition to domestic reform, which I fully agree, we also need to pay attention to the idea that whether all of us as a Cambodian people, because Khmer people are unified enough in this particular regard. I think the conflict has taught us that, in fact, we do. Right? In fact, we are unified enough to fight against aggression. But this particular unified spirit seems to die down a bit now. Right? You take a look at the system provided by people to the refugees at the border at the moment seems to be decreasing a bit. So then the question is how to get all of them together for a common cause, not just one time, but from now and until the future. Sorry, today I have a lot of questions. I don't have answers because these questions I've been asking myself like for many months now. I don't have the answer. I hope you can help me answer the questions as well.
We all students to the current situation. We try to find some enlightenment or solutions to what's happening right now. But let me go back to our topics here. So far, all of you have mentioned about the leverages of the United States and to some extent the Chinese. What about the other powers, other actors that have evolved? Because as you may be aware, since the beginning of the conflict, so even the conflict per se has the deep-shooted timelines, but from the Cambodian perspective, it began on 28 May 2025. So since May 2025 until these days, we have seen a lot of statements, a lot of inputs from other third parties, not really the US and China. ASEAN is one actor. ASEAN, especially Malaysia as the chair in 2025, is one of the most outspoken third party in this conflict. We all know it's the political willingness of the chair and the chairmanship obligation or something. But again, if Malaysia back then they're not interested in taking this task, the involvement of ASEAN, we would not have seen this involvement of ASEAN like productive as this conflict.
If I may, let me interject it a bit with that. I think I may perhaps disagree with that a bit, saying that Anwar Ibrahim came in based on his so-called political willingness to do so. I think it's part of, for me, my own observation is that it's part of the learning process of ASEAN. ASEAN itself as a regional organization has actually learned throughout its existence. It has learned during the 2008 crisis. It realized it didn't do enough. Leaders at the time, the rotating chair of ASEAN at the time, realized that that was a mistake. right? There was a missing not to do anything about it. So Anwar Ibrahim actually learned that. I think he has actually learned that. So then this is the good time actually for him, including, I would not say the political willingness is not there, but alongside with the lesson that ASEAN has learned. So you put these two together, you see that ASEAN actually has learned from the conflict itself. So ASEAN has actually come in. So this is a very good lesson, and ASEAN has set a good learning or practice path for the next chairs to come in. And people say the Philippines will not care so much about it. I may perhaps partially disagree with that too. As we speak, there are meetings about Cambodian-Thai conflict happening in Manila. So this has shown a lot that actually ASEAN has learned over time to adapt to our own situation. To what extent are we talking about the principle of non-intervention, and how do we actually interpret it, and how do we practice it in this situation? So I think ASEAN has learned quite a bit, and I think we have to give some credits to ASEAN in this sense.
Well, let's agree to disagree, because in ASEAN system per se, it's boiled down to the chair, the country chair. If the country chair is interested in taking the task, that task has become a regional issue. Let's call it a cow as a cow. But if not, the issue become fatigue, perhaps frozen. Of course, the issue on the ground still boiling down, but in regional discussion is a fatigue, frozen. You don't go anywhere far. Just look at the issue of Myanmar, for instance. From 2021, 2010 to 2023 and so on. You tell me who is it ASEAN has learned the process, or is it because of the willingness of the chair? 2021 Brunei chair, for instance. Brunei was pressure to have some sort of joint statements during the visit, having special invoice. Cambodia, on the other hand, of course, the external pressure is there, but whether the one in charge want to do it or not. For the Cambodian chair back then, the leadership back then enthusiastically want to tackle the issue. Like Prime Minister Hun Sen back then, he did the visit to Burma to Naypyidaw at the start of the chairmanship. So again, let's agree to disagree on the matter. But going back to the Cambodia-Thailand conflict, we discussed about the role of ASEAN, we discussed about the role of China, the US. What about other actors? Like, from my point of view, I have followed, because I'm interested in doing this international involvement in Southeast Asian conflict, and one of the case study is the Cambodia-Thailand conflict. I have tracked the involvement of other actors, and one of the interesting cases and unique case is the Japanese. We have witnessed their visit, not the high-level visit or something, but working level before the war occurred in July. So as I remember, there were two outstanding visits. One was by a gentleman from the chief of staff or something, and another one is the national security advisor to the prime minister. So the involvement could begin from then on. And in September, amid the ceasefire turmoil, amid the GBC meeting in September, it was a productive meeting. Japan called for the reopening of the border, of which received many backlash from both sides. not only from the Thai side but also from Cambodia side. So, what's your take on the Japanese role in this conflict? You think would it how would you rate these unique and natural roles of these non-US and China state?
I think let me take that because I like the question a lot. I think Japan has done quite a lot of good jobs in Southeast Asia, not just in the case of Cambodian-Thailand conflict, but in Myanmar as well. You mentioned Myanmar earlier on. We can come back to that point if you like. So Japan has done quite a diplomacy or backdoor diplomacy, and it to a certain extent it helps. But Japan so far is a gentleman, right? A gentleman in times of conflict. You may not, if you want to actually resolve it, right? You want to contribute to it. You may need to require more than just being a gentleman. Then my colleague mentioned about the leverage. Of course, you have leverage, but to what extent your leverage is that I like to use 0 to 10 all the time, right? 0 to 10, how much leverage? Yeah, how much leverage you have. You may have 5, of course, that the leverage. You may have 6, right? So you have to think about it in terms of that spectrum. So coming to this, any contribution by external actor like Japan is welcome to bring peace to the region. But the question, I think, it based on the Japanese themselves to decide how much do they want to play, right? How much do they want to contribute to bring about peace? Is it just about quiet diplomacy, advocating for, let's say, the ceasefire, just that, or there should be other actions that Japan can take to be seen as more assertive, right? So that actors, including Cambodia and Thailand, realize that now we have seen a new Japan, right, coming into Southeast Asia, to the particular region. So Japan may need to think about beyond quiet diplomacy, which is a good strategy for the past several decades. But given the current evolving geopolitical landscape in the region, Japan may need to think about the quiet diplomacy. They can learn the lesson from being closer to China. I think that lesson, to a certain extent, can be applied to this case too in Southeast Asia.
What about Chhengpor and Niseiy? You have anything to jump in?
You want to go first? You could go first.
I think except in the whole region of Asia Pacific, as we call now Indo-Pacific, except the case of China and sometimes the case of South Korea, in many societies in Asia, there is a lot of sense of likability of Japan's term of soft power. So far, you ask around, there's a lot of winning heart and mind for Japan.
Heart-to-heart diplomacy.
A minute, yeah. But so whenever Japan speaks, people listen. There are certain cases that Japan diplomacy did work. We have to credit Japan, at least in the case of Cambodia, the peace process in 1980, 1990s, and then when it comes to this rise, the phenomenon of the rise of China, the discussion in 2010, 2020 about the way that China have hard power, but they cannot outpower Japan in terms of soft power, in terms of winning heart and minds, which is another layer of influence. But in the time of global, what we call global reorder, global geopolitical realignment, it comes to a realization, because you have to realize the Thai-Cambodian conflict hurt Japan interest. Japan have initiative in the region. The region is the supplier of Japanese company. You have Greater Mekong Sub-region initiative in the region. You have, to be specific, the Southern Economic Corridor connecting Bangkok Parimanthan to Poi Phet to Phnom Penh to Bavat and then Ho Chi Minh City at the end. So when you have the border closed at Poi Phet, it cut this corridor into two. So Japan interest would be hurt. So that's why it explained a lot of intervention and Japan have this philosophy and principle to promote peace in the region. They have their own way of diplomacy. So that's why they came in and intervened quietly. They did not make a lot of noise, but they talked to leader of power that be, at least in Cambodia. I'm not sure to what extent their interlocutor in Thailand, who that would be. But even in Thailand, there is some consideration on the possibility before the second class of the fighting, with the Japan suggestion to reopen the border. So if you track the speed, you have the current defense minister who belonged to the former military faction in Thailand, trying to float the idea. So there is some consideration on Japanese proposal, at least in Thailand at the time. And then the result was not positive.
That's true.
Because they are domestic motive quite more. So with the election all the way on the horizon in Thailand at the time, there would be no risk taking for them. So they have to think about their own political interest in the country first, before thinking about external partner like Japan. So that's why that Japan likability, leverage, and intervention have limit at the time.
I see.
So that's why. But moving forward, Japan is still a very important partner, because, and like I said earlier, that those who with real leverage, who can intervene and stop the fighting in between Cambodia and Thailand, is only China and US. But actors like Japan and other Indo-Pacific middle power like Australia, we haven't talked about them that much. They have a lot of leverage. They're trying to build a lot of influence and likability in the regions. But it depends on when and how they want to use that leverage. And in the case of the first fighting, President Trump came in. Leverage is being used as a street fighter, not a gentleman. So in the case of conflict, like Sovinda said, you may want to be a gentleman and trying to say, hey, stop fighting. Or you came in as a street fighter and say, stop fighting or else. So that's just the way of communication and the culture of diplomacy. But moving forward, if situation appear to be calm, I think Japan have a role to play to talk down the rhetoric on both sides, or at least provide the avenue for negotiation moving forward, given the connection, given the influence that Japan have, and I said any intervention from any power would be welcoming in order to ease the tension, in order to return to normalcy.
I agree. Just for an footnote of information for our audiences. There was some proposal back in September 2025. So the proposition to reopen the border was there. The Cambodian side and the Thai side agree. According to the Thai defense minister, he said that there are three zones to gradual reopening of the border. Number one, the low risk zone. The low risk here is Kong Tra, the one down south near the coastal zone. So that's the low risk zone, which would have been reopened, sometime after that GBC meeting. And the second zone is the mid-risk zone. Mid-risk zone at that time is somewhere around Poipet, Arang Patet in Sakeo. And the third zone is the high-risk zone, which is around the most fierce clash fighting in Udol Minjay, opposite to Surin, and Preavihi opposite to Sisaket and Ubon Ratchathini on the Thai side. So that's just for the footnote. So to Niseiy, you have anything to add to the input by Paul and Sovinda?
Well, I think both speakers already mentioned. I think I like the way Sovinda mentions the quiet and gentle
Gentleman
diplomacy. So I think it is not just about the border issue, but I think Japan has been a long-term, have been well respected by the Cambodian government, by the Thai side, and then the way that the country has been dealing with the country in the regions is quite polite and not appear to be interfering in other country domestic politics, even issue within the democracy, human rights, and so on. So you rarely hear anything about that from Japan side, but only it backdoor support with the process rather than explicitly saying things like this. So with Cambodian, I think it has been a taboo, for example, like on the election and certain things about democracy and human rights. So I think the way that Japan engage with the country is quite polite, but I think that also need a reflection. I think they have the leverage, they have a respect, they have things that would be doing more in assertive way, like Sovinda mentioned. So we might not know exactly what they're doing, but I think in a way forward, I think more assertive. But it depends on the issue. But you see Japan on Taiwan, Japan on when they directly engage with China, and then Japan become more outspoken, assertive, and so on. So I think with the country in the region, maybe that should be a thing for reflection as well. So I want to see more engaging, more assertive in a way that it could exercise its own diplomacy. So I want to see more from Japan, but I know that they have a certain way of dealing with it, but it might be slowly adjusting to the change of regional environment and so on. So the role would be there.
Yeah, definitely. So moving to another segment on the way forward on the strategic choice for regional states in Southeast Asia. So the question to all speakers: how can all of us here, how can the Southeast Asian countries, including Cambodia, should do to engage those extra-regional powers more productively without losing or compromising our strategic autonomy?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the very important question, the term strategic autonomy and sovereignty, for Southeast Asia is the top priority. But for a time being, I don't know since when, but for a time being, we seem to forget that particular concept, strategic autonomy, when we try to engage the US, like some Southeast Asian countries, for example, the Philippines and Singapore, and other countries to try to engage China. So we seem to forget the strategic autonomy in that sense. Your question is, how do we do that, right?
Yeah.
How do we maintain and enhance our own strategic autonomy and sovereignty while engaging external partners? I think one thing we all perhaps ask ourselves is, again, do we actually need it for 100%, or do we comfortable with compromising it? Or is it strategic autonomy? Is it a reality, or is it a myth? Because for some countries, strategic autonomy is actually a myth. They live under the direction of the great powers. So, but for me, I think strategic autonomy is really important. All countries should uphold it, because you can actually decide for yourself. So one way you can actually do that is you can calculate whether your fear of being swarmed by big power is it how big is it, right?
Yep.
How big is it? For example, I can allude to the idea of Singapore being an island state, right? Being an island state, feeling vulnerable 24/7, propel Singapore to impress the American military and economic might, so that America can play a more predominant role in all aspects of the Singaporean society. But the question we need to ask: are we in that situation where you are too small, you are micro, and you feel threatened 24/7, so that you only crave for great powers support all the time?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions today. Not so much of an answer, but if you can answer that question, I'm sure you will see the light at the tunnel, as my colleague has mentioned.
Yeah, it's a very, very big question, PhD dissertation or something. But what about Chhengpor? What's your input? You agree with the Sovinda's question on whether the strategic autonomy is a myth, or is it a reality or something that we should aspire of?
So we should talk about the concept and understanding of sovereignty. It's people talk about it, referencing it to the UN Charter and stuff, but it should not be that static. Sovereignty in the current context now is not about keeping everybody out at your own will, but have the capability to decide who you let in and how long. So capability to say that would be a justification for sovereignty. And I say it's sometimes a very abstract term when even in country, but I'm taking the case of the Cold War time, the non-aligned movement. You have this number of countries, but those countries always have their own way of dealing with power, their own way of alignment within a non-aligned movement framework. So that have to take into question and take into lesson from the previous practice. But also, in a way, another case would be the case of ASEAN centrality. We talk about that. ASEAN member states talk about that, and for the case of Cambodia, the ASEAN is in potential big leverage for Cambodia as a small state, because if we join, like we said about unification in the context of Cambodia, but in the context of the region, smaller state coming together as an association of whatsoever intergovernmental organization, could give them more leverage to talk to bigger power. But when that mechanism no longer works, people still talk about ASEAN centrality, but everybody have a plan B. You have, taking the case of negotiation of the free trade agreement between ASEAN and the EU, it has been a while and did not produce any results.
Yeah.
So the EU itself, who champion multilateralism, they handpicked certain countries within ASEAN to do the FTA, bilateral FTA, not the region to region.
Vietnam, yeah.
Singapore, Vietnam, and now perhaps Indonesia, soon to be Thailand. So everybody have a plan B for that. And what I would, I'm not that qualified. If a PhD question, I'm not a PhD.
Question for all of us.
Yes. The answer would be if there's some bizarre realist approach taking a page from the playbook of the Chinese right now, the way that they look at the case of the Russia up north after the invasion of Ukraine, there's some sort of surrounding and blockade sanction. So the Chinese leadership also think about that scenario. So that's why if you look at the Chinese strategy right now is to keep cooperating with all regional countries, but they risk There is in the way that they are prepared for an autarky moment for themselves. In case of everybody blocking China, can China survive in its own ecosystem?
Yep.
And I think we have to learn from that as well in terms of how we deal with the new hostile and increasingly challenging international environments. That if those strategic thinkers need to have a dystopian scenario all the time in case of the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
How to deal with that, and how would you build yourself to prepare for that scenario at the same time that you keep on the current baseline threats.
Yeah.
So you need always to have a plan B and if possible plan C to deal to keep the survivability in the future.
Yeah.
Because we have to understand that any country need to have this understanding that the world offers you nothing. You need to stay relevant to be important to exist. Otherwise, you will be forgotten.
Yeah.
Definitely.
You are not entitled to exist if international law is not protecting you.
There's a saying say that the world owes you nothing.
Yeah.
Yep. What about you, Niseiy?
I think there's my point. I think Bong Sovinda and Chhengpor mentioned like there's no turning back point from now on. So it's about like Chhengpor said, it's about if the country is a person, you need to be strong enough to survive in these current moments and then learn to adjust to the situation. So he said the term sovereignty, strategic autonomy might not be, it is important, but at the same time, it have to be inward looking into yourself, a reflection, what you're going to do more in order to be relevant, in order to be able to survive. I mean, because this is already a turning point there's no turning back point from now. But multilateralism, we back to the point that multilateralism again, it continues to be important, but you yourself have to be strong enough to make sure that you survive within the system.
Okay. So we have talked about the being relevant, being important, and most importantly about the existential of the states, of the small state, of the regional state in South Asia. So briefly before we conclude our talk here, should we do the strengthening the self-sufficiency, or should we throw ourselves to the international community?
I think it's how do we call it? It's one side of the same coin, just one way or the other. You have to do both of it. You cannot just do one and forget the other. You do one, forget the other. You can take a look at North Korea. North Korea is very self-sufficient, but it's not prosperous, right? You don't actually want that. But you have to do both, self-sufficiency and you have to immerse yourself with the international system so that you can prosper. I wouldn't care so much about the second option, meaning get yourself involved in the international system. The first priority should be how do we be self-sufficient. I think the idea has been forgotten for the time being, that how can we be self-sufficient? Our economy pretty much depends on a few sectors, right? One on agriculture, on tourism, and tourism itself is the idea of involving yourself in the international system. We depend on the garment, footwear sector, but that also depends on the international system. Agriculture is the only thing that we can survive ourselves. Build on the modern agricultural production, you can actually develop other things. So it has to start from that. I think the important priority now should be looking at how can we improve our agricultural production, how can we sell it, right? How can we develop it, how can we package it, and how can we sell it at higher prices, both in the country and outside the country. And this should be the self-sufficient strategy that not just the government agencies, but all of us who care so much about that further think about it, right? How can we actually do that? Right? How can we actually do that? So again, the question I have again, how can we now and into the future improve and enhance our own agricultural sector so that we can be self-sufficient?
Yep, Chhengpor, about the self-sufficiency or going with the international community.
I think I touched on that a little bit in my previous answer, but to just shortly at the end, just my small idea, 2-cent idea would be to keep promoting ASEAN and the UN system, at least for the case of Cambodia. But in case those two do not work, make sure you have a backdoor.
Plan B.
I'll see.
What is that?
I can be naive, but I normally focus on how we can immerse ourselves in the international system more. I think we haven't done enough. Because we are with a status as least developed country like Sovinda has mentioned, so I don't focus more on self-sufficiency because it can be like a certain country, a Paris state like North Korea and so on. So you don't focus on self-sufficiency, you focus on how to improve yourself. So self-improvement like a person should be a key, but how we can achieve that. So it depends on domestic environment, domestic politics again. Back to what we have been discussing, and immersing ourselves more in international system. So there's no back down on support for international system because it's only the way that most countries around the world. So you still have like 193 countries in the UN system. So it's not about how we should give up on the system, but how can we find a way to improve it. So I think the world is not going to end within 10, 20 or 100 years. It's going to be here to stay. So the key is that how we can find a way. So I think a lot of people out there that have a like-minded politics and wonder to create a world where prosperity and peace could be maintained. But the only way is that you need to act, and then how we can, because it's just one question on climate crisis. So I might jump into that example, but I think there's a lot of cooperation could be made through this kind of sphere, like it's a global issue where all power agrees that we suffer from climate crisis. It's not about war in Ukraine, it's not about conflict in South China Sea or maybe Taiwan Strait, whatever, but you need to come together. You need to address this issue for the future generation. So there's a space for communication, a space for collaboration.
Yeah.
Just find a way to cooperate. So then you can have more confidence. United States and China, so that's a space they can collaborate. But let forget about Trump because it's someone else who see climate change is a hawk. But scientifically proven that climate change. So you have a lot of space to collaborate. So build yourself, try to find a way to improve the country economically, socially, and then at the same time immerse yourself more. And then be prepared for something unpredictable like Plan B or Plan C, whatever. So it's about planning, just like a human being. So you know exactly what you're dealing with and how to prepare yourself for the worst. Yep.
Yeah. So final question, just one word or one sentence of what I'm about to ask here. So in an era of geopolitical crossroad, not so much only in the region, but in the global security and global politics. Can Southeast Asia or Cambodia can we still shape our own strategic future, or are we increasingly shaped by external factors?
I think we are under the influence of the external actors, for sure. But the important question and strategy to ask and do is how can we take that external influence into our own domestic consideration and devise our own strategy responsive to that external influence in the way that it can help us stronger.
I think sometimes you have no choice but to bandwagon with those influence. So best case scenario here is for smaller states is to align your interests with those of those influence, external influence, to ensure that you can get best outcome possible out of that. If you cannot resist that in a way that keeping your country, keeping your people at peace, and so that they can prosper in long term.
Yeah. Well,
I would go with Chhengpor case, like make sure that you see to maximize your interest and you see fit. So there's no rigid position.
Answer, yeah.
So there's no rigid answer to that. So it depends. So it's quite complicated to have a specific answer to that. But make sure you continue to do anything that in a way that could maximize your interest.
Yep. So to our audience who were watching here, what's your take? Can we have the ability to shape our future, or are we shaped by the external forces? So thank you, and thank you for paying attention and watching this episode, and stay tuned for the next one.